toxic masculinity.
Take a look at this. A 5-ounce solid silver Apollo 11 coin just like this could be yours for free. It's Silver Month over at Noble Gold. The new administration is finally here. Oh, joy. And one of their big things is, as you know, climate change. And renewables need solar panels, electric circuits, and lots of other gizmos that used, you guessed it, silver. With a projected $2 trillion investment, there's never been a better time to profit from the insanity in Washington, D.C. with your silver IRA. Visit the Noble Gold website today at noblegoldinvestments.com. The Biden administration wants cops to seize guns without a warrant. This is actually pretty unbelievable. So this comes from a story about a husband and wife who were fighting over a coffee mug. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's see here. This is from Forbes, which is fun, because Forbes is not a right-wing publication, right? It's a left-wing publication. So, but they're reporting on it pretty neutrally because it's pretty ridiculous. So let's see here. Biden administration urges Supreme Court to let cops enter homes and seize guns without a warrant. Now, it's supposed to be a very specific kind of circumstance in which they can do this, but you know that this will be taken advantage of by the left because Democrats, they're notorious for taking little exceptions to laws or loopholes or something like that and manipulating them, in ways they were never intended to be manipulated. They're very manipulative. So we have to be very specific with our laws. We have to be very strict with our laws. We can't let things slide or let things shift a little bit here or there. But that's what it looks like could happen here. So it says the U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday will hear oral arguments in Caniglia versus Strom, a case that could have sweeping consequences for policing, due process, and mental health, with the Biden administration and attorneys general from 9 states urging the high court to uphold warrantless gun confiscation. It's weird that it's attorneys general and not attorney generals. Why is that? I don't understand the grammar there. But anyway, what would ultimately become a Fourth Amendment case began with an elderly couple's spat over a coffee mug. This is true. It's kind of funny. And actually, I love this story. I love what this guy says. It's great. This guy's great. In August 2015, 68-year-old Edward Caniglia joked to Kim, his wife of 22 years, that he refused to use a certain coffee mug after his brother-in-law had used it because he, quote, might catch a case of dishonesty. I like this guy. That quip quickly spiraled into an hour-long argument. Growing exhausted from the bickering, Edward stormed into his bedroom, grabbed an unloaded handgun, and put it on the kitchen table in front of his wife. With a flair for the dramatic, he then asked, "Why don't you just shoot me and get me out of my misery?" Which I also love. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the tactic backfired. The two continued to argue. Eventually, Edward took a drive to cool off, but when he returned, their argument flared up once again. This time, Kim decided to leave the house to spend the night at a motel. The next day, Kim phoned home. No answer. Worried, she called the police in Cranston, Rhode Island, and asked them to perform a well check on her husband and escort her home. When they arrived, police spoke with Edward on the back deck. According to the incident report, he seemed normal. He was calm for the most part, and he even said he would never commit suicide. However, none of the officers, and they did take somewhat dramatic action, and we've seen this many, many times, right? Where there's like an old person, a wellness check is done, and then police take all of these dramatic actions that are totally unnecessary, totally unwarranted. I remember several years back, this may be like 10 years ago now, I don't know, but it was quite a while ago. There was some old man, the police came to check on him. He said he was fine, but the police wanted him to go to like a psychiatric check and he wouldn't. He was like, no, piss off. And they tased him. And his wife was like, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? He's obviously like, I was worried about him and I didn't want you to come and tase him, but there is a problem. There's this idea that police in America are racist, and that's why there are occasionally incidents where police abuse their power. But this is from a very specific perspective, right? This is the perspective of people who already have it in their heads that police are racist. And then if police abuse their power in any way against, say, like a black person, those people who have that perspective already in mind think, oh, this is because they're racist. right? There's no, let's see what they've done. Let's consider whether or not it's because they're racist and then apply that accusation. It's just, that's the assumption. And so when abuse of power is levied by a cop, then it is assumed to be racism. But the truth is, we don't have a problem with cops and racism in America. We have a problem with cops and a-holism, right? So there are some cops that are a-holes, all right? That's true in every profession. One of my best friends is a cop, and I have talked to him many times about this, and he's like, yeah, some cops are a-holes, and they probably shouldn't be cops, right? Like, and some people are just drawn to that profession because they're pricks, right? I mean, you got a guy that grows up and, goes to high school. He's a high school bully, and then he gets out of high school, and what is he going to do with his life? Well, he can work in a factory. He can, there's lots of different things. But one thing, he could continue to be a bully legally if he becomes a police officer, right? So some people, like one of my best friends, this guy who's a cop, he became a cop because he is a very good man, right? He was a tough guy, and he wanted to make a difference, and he got into policing for that reason. But that's not every cop. A lot of cops are like my friend. A lot of cops are a-holes, right? And so maybe we should weed those guys out instead of looking, trying to get cops to, take critical race theory training and stuff like that, because it's not going to be effective, right? If you tell a bunch of cops you got to stop being racist and they're not racist, it's actually not going to modify their behavior. But if you tell a bunch of cops to stop being a-holes and they are in fact horrible people, maybe something can be done there. Maybe some progress can be made. So that's been my position for like a very long time. And this is another instance of this, it appears. Okay, so none of the officers had asked Edward any questions about the factors relating to his risk of suicide, risk of violence, prior misuse of firearms. Edward had no criminal record or no history of violence or self-harm. In fact, one of the officers later admitted that he didn't consult any specific psychological or psychiatric criteria or medical professionals for the decisions that day. And so we'll see what the decisions are now. Still, police were convinced that Edward could hurt himself and insisted that he head to a local hospital for psychiatric evaluation. It's always when police are convinced you're going to hurt yourself that things start to go awry. Let's see here. Because, this is just a power move, right? Everything seems to indicate that you're fine, but we're going to demand that you go see seek a psychiatric evaluation anyway, despite the fact that you're perfectly fine. Why? Piss off. Cops should not have that right to demand somebody take a psychological evaluation if there's no good reason for it. I suppose if it does look like they are committing self-harm some way, right? They're bleeding or something like that. They've been messing themselves up in somewhere. They've been sitting in the garage with the gas on. Okay, yeah, send them a psychological evaluation. Maybe they should have the right to force them then. But just generally, when somebody doesn't appear to have any problem, what the hell is that? Compounding the dishonesty. Oh, sorry. Still, police were convinced that he could hurt himself and he should go get a psychiatric evaluation. After refusing and insisting that his mental health wasn't any of their business, which is correct, Edward agreed only after police falsely promised that they would not seize his guns while he was gone. Compounding the dishonesty, police then told Kim, his wife, that Edward had consented to the confiscation. Believing the seizures were approved by her husband, Kim led the officers to the handguns that the couple owned, which were promptly seized. Even though Edward was immediately discharged from the hospital, police only returned the firearms after he filed a civil rights lawsuit against them. Critically, when the police seized the guns, they didn't claim that it was an emergency or to prevent any imminent danger. Instead, the officers argued that their actions were a form of community caretaking, a narrow exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement. So you don't have to have a warrant if you're acting for community caretaking, apparently. But community caretaking is only for impounding cars that are dead in the middle of the road. That's really the only reason that was established. Let's see here. First created by the Supreme Court nearly 50 years ago, the community caretaking exception was designed for cases involving impounded cars and highway safety on the grounds that police are often called to car accidents to remove nuisances like inoperable vehicles on public roads. Both a district and appellate court upheld the seizures as reasonable. So some of these lower courts are saying that despite the fact that this law was designed specifically, very specifically for cars that are dead in the middle of the road and could pose a public hazard, they've actually ruled that cops can actually just go into your house and take your guns. That's a perfectly fine interpretation of that law. No, it is not. No, it is not. And I certainly hope that the Supreme Court rules against this. Siding with law enforcement, the First Circuit noted that police officer must act as a master of all emergencies who is expected to provide an infinite variety of services to prevent and protect community safety. By letting police operate without a warrant, the community caretaking exception is designed to give police elbow room to take appropriate action, the court added. This is how they've adjudicated in the past. But now we're looking at this Caniglia case. In their opening for the Supreme Court, attorneys for Caniglia warned that extending the community caretaking exception to homes would be anathema for to the Fourth Amendment because it would grant police a blank check to intrude upon their home. That fear is not unwarranted. In jurisdictions that have extended the community caretaking exception to homes, everything from loud music to leaky pipes have been used to justify warrantless invasion of the home. A joint amicus brief by the ACLU, the Cato Institute, and the American Conservative Union revealed. What the problem with this is that Democrats will use any law that has to be interpreted in ways that allow them to do things for which they were never intended, right? And this is a perfect example. So we make a law that says that police can tow a car out of a road, and the police say, "Oh, we can." That means that we can go into your home and take your guns. What? And then you've got these like activist left-wing judges that go, "Yeah, that seems totally reasonable." I assume they're left-wing judges. Maybe they're Republicans, but if they are, they're terrible Republicans. Because republicanism is about liberty and freedom. Let's see here. So now this is where we get to the Joe Biden stuff, because Joe Biden's administration is going up against, this is trying to encourage the court to rule in a way that allows the police to do this sort of thing. And this is terrifying, because if police can go in and just take your guns because, for community, what's it called? Whatever, community caretaking, and they've already shifted that from towing cars off the side of the road. Who's to say they're not going to eventually say that a Democrat politician can simply determine that everyone in the state is in danger of self-harm or harming others because they own a gun, and therefore, through this community caretaking exception, all guns in the state could be seized? Now, you might think that sounds ridiculous, but a lot of ridiculous things are being suggested right now, like making Washington, D.C. a state, making Puerto Rico a state, lowering the voting age, establishing mail-in voting as the standard. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff is being suggested right now. This is not out of the realm of possibilities. I think this is a possibility, especially if it's something like, say, like a militia, right? Like, let's say you have a bunch of militia guys and something happens like what happened on January 6th, the Democrats would definitely want to use something like this to go in and just take their guns, right? They would say, "Oh, this is for community caretaking. These people pose a danger. They walked through the Capitol building one day. That was terrible. We better take their guns." You know that it's going to be used for stuff like this. You know it. The Democrats are very sneaky like that. You gotta keep them on a very short leash. This expansion could have perverse effects and disincentivize people from calling for help. As that brief noted, when every interaction with police or request for help can become an invitation for the police to invade the home, the willingness of the individuals to seek assistance when it is most needed will suffer or will be reduced. But in its amicus brief before the High Court, the Biden administration glossed over these concerns and called the justices to uphold the First Circuit's ruling, noting that the ultimate touchstone of the Fourth Amendment is reasonableness. The Justice Department argued that warrants should not be presumptively required when a government official's actions is objectively grounded in non-investigatory public interests such as health or safety. That is how fascist regimes take your freedoms. That is how they take your civil liberties, right? It's through these words like health and safety, right? Safety. They always say, "Oh, it's for the public safety. It's for the public safety." And we have to take your freedoms away because of safety. That's always what they say. That's always what they say. I'm not going to read the rest of this. I mean, it basically continues on talking about the details of the case. And if this goes through, I have a lot of concerns about the Supreme Court. But I don't think that it will. I think that we're okay. All right. So I think it's time to move on to the next story. What do you guys think? I get very annoyed with these things that I want to shift. I want to shift a little bit. Let's see. Is the next story amusing? Oh, hold on. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Oh, yes, the next story is amusing. Actually, I love the next story. It's not a nice thing. It's not a good thing, but it is an interesting thing. So let's have a look at the next story. This is something that was covered by Tucker Carlson the other day, and I was just astonished. I was like kind of annoyed that I didn't cover it first, but you can't win them all, right? Let's see here. So 2 racist senators refuse to confirm white Biden nominees. If Biden nominates you and you're white, they're not going to vote for you because you're white. This is about as racist as a thing as I could possibly imagine. This is just pure racism, pure and simple. 2 Asian women will not vote for white people because they're white. That's insane. Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.